Hello, I'm a little late to the party, but let's do the Booktube Spin number 3. Actually, Rick decided to, not decided, but sort of accidentally did this a month early, so I'm going to go back to his 4-month-old video, 4-week-old video now, and see what the result was. But I decided, because I did not as great in my last Booktube Spin, I ended up DNFing Constellation of Vital Phenomenon by Anthony Marra, a very good book, which I just couldn't connect to the characters, and because of that, I ended up a good long ways into it. I ended up DNFing it because it was getting slower and slower. But with that in mind, I thought, hey, you know what? I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna not toss out, but I'm gonna set aside some of the more literary books on my list, and I'm going to do a straight up genre one because I've got so many unread books in my library, especially back from the days when I kind of hunted through secondhand bookstores for little paperbacks with tiny little font, which at the time young Jay thought, no problem. Now older Jay is going to have to kind of come up with a decision on some of these, a lot of these novels of like, okay, is it actually feasible for me to read them anymore, or do I need to take note of certain ones and go, I should get that in ebook where I can make it much larger. But that said, I thought I would go through some of that backlist and pick out books, genre books that I read. They're probably mostly science fiction and fantasy. However, there's some that are mystery or sea adventures and stuff like that. And I figured, okay, let's make a pile of that. That should be fun, and I can show off 20 books from my library that I haven't gotten to after all this time. So with that said, let me just quickly rattle through the list. I've already written down the order and the number, so I've got that in my head. I've got that written down in stone. So number 1, Elmore Leonard, The Moonshine War. This is an older Elmore Leonard, like 1969. I figure if I'm going to do Elmore Leonard, I'll do him in his early, kind of middle years, 1969. Before he was respectable, but was more pulpy, nice thin, pulpy, straight to the point stories. Kenneth Lee, a fantasy science fiction author from who just passed away not too many years ago. One of these kind of big biggies, female biggies in the field that you just don't hear that much about. Whose work has been pretty consistent. So yes, The Silver Medal Lover by her. I'm going to try and do these for a little bit quicker. The 57th Kafka by Rudy Rucker. Interestingly, sometimes sleazy. I don't know, sleazy, kind of very Californian to my mind. I don't know if he's actually from California, but kind of author. Maybe this book will follow that trajectory. James Morrow, Only Begotten Daughter. He has a lot of his fiction, his fantasy, science fiction definitely has a very kind of a biblical feel to it. So yeah, he's an interesting one. A little bit of Diane Wynne Jones, who YA author, actually skewing kind of on the younger side of things. Some of her works, maybe unfortunately for a British author of a certain generation, has a tendency to be a lot of kind of fat shaming in it and stuff like that, but still like really a foundational author. Stuff like Howl's Moving Castle and stuff like that is like, is really what she's well known for. And it's a really, her Durkheim novels I just really enjoyed. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put her on the list. A little bit of Robert E. Howard, The Sword Woman. Just one of these, it's a tiny little like kind of I think it's a novella, not just a bunch of short stories. It's a little novella of Conan work with one of these awesomely kind of inept covers. You gotta love that. We got the Robot Who Looked Like Me, Robert Sheckley. I think this is a collection of Sheckley's short stories. Short story authors in science fiction were a big part of the early days of science fiction, but sadly, most of them, if they haven't left behind the big novel, kind of get forgotten. So yeah, Robert Sheckley. The Kindly Ones, Melissa Scott. This isn't The Kindly Ones, the one that's following a mass murder in World War II. No, this is a different The Kindly Ones by Melissa Scott. I think that's a science fiction kind of post-apocalyptic. Yeah, science fiction-y one. John Sladek, Keep the Giraffe Burning. Very fun, humorous, kind of very odd writer. The Mueller Fokker effect I've enjoyed by him. He and Sladek. He's probably a little bit more on the lit side of things. Theodore Surgeon, another one of these big kind of short story writers. He seems to have had like high periods and low periods. I don't know where this falls. This collection of short stories of his, science fiction, I assume most fantastical worlds dreamed up. So maybe it's also fantasy, but with wonderfully psychedelic covers, which, you know, obviously drew my eye when I was going through the things. Michael Shea, Nifty Lean, which I picked up mostly for personal, very autobiographical reasons, but just sort of one of these kind of another sword and sorcery guy who's probably forgotten, maybe for a good reason. I'll have to take a look and see. Somebody not definitely forgotten, The Truth by Terry Pratchett, one of his Discworld novels. This would be a reread, but it would be an extremely fun one. I remember enjoying this one. It's a newspaper novel, but set in the fantasy world that he has created on Discworld. Lucius Sheppard, Life During Wartime, kind of fantasy Vietnam novel. I've had this and a couple of his other books for a long time, but I've never cracked them open. So I figured, oh, what the heck, I'd put that on the list. One that The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Roffey, because when I did my mail haul, I actually failed to mention her name right off the bat, which is just like, oh. But definitely a book I want to get to. And hey, if it came up on a spin, that would be awesome. We've got Gene Wolfe, The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories, which is actually a carryover from my other pile. Yes, it's called The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories is one story, and then there are other stories in there by Gene Wolfe, who is a very interesting kind of his stories usually have a lot more going on under the surface that you as the reader have to work to find them. So he's one of these people who's very well respected in science fiction fantasy things, but maybe not as well actually read because of that work that he sometimes requires. H. Beampiper, The Uller Uprising. I know him from his Fuzzies books. And I figured, oh, I'll try another one of him. He's very much kind of golden age of science fiction era. Was not a success. Had a tragic ending. Was one of these kind of definitely starving guys in a field where you're writing for the money. So yeah, I thought I'd give him another try. Tad Williams, which I brought over from the other thing, big honkin' fat fantasy novel. If I start this one, would I continue on with the series, or would I go, I've read the first one, well, I don't need to read any more? We'll find out. The Master of Ballantrae by Robert Louis Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson is sort of kind of one of these foundation guys for a lot of what gets turned into, becomes genre fiction later. Definitely big influence, so that would be a fun one to read. A little bit of Patrick O'Brien apparently for $150. I picked this up. One of his Master and Commander, not Master. Well, they're called the Aubry Adventures, and this is number 2 in the series. I read the first one and I really enjoyed that, so I figured at some point I will get on to the second one. And since I have it here, I think this is number 2. God, I hope this is number 2. Well, even if it isn't, I'll read it because supposedly you should be able to drop into any novel like this and just, enjoy the story. And finally, one from a little while ago when I actually got to go to a physical bookstore is Monkey King by Wu Chen, translated by Julia Lovell, which is one of these classics of Chinese literature, where it's definitely got that fantastical element to it, but obviously it's one of these big foundation works of Chinese literature at the same time. So yes, that is my list of 20, counting down from 20 to 1. So that in between there that we've got Oh, see if I can get my phone to turn back on, or my other phone. See, I've got this, my new phone, and then I've got my old phone where I can just kind of, I can use this as a notepad now. Yeah, so starting off with the Monkey King and going all the way to the Moonshine War by Elmer Leonard as my picks for the Booktube Spin. So this is video number 1. I will now film video number 2, which is me finding out what the actual what I'm actually going to be reading, and finding out what the big surprise is, because Rick's video says something about there's a surprise, and you have to watch to the end after the spin. So maybe I'll watch the spin, react to that, and then find out what the surprise is. Maybe the surprise was, oops, I did it early. I guess we'll find out. All right, more videos later.